Live.
Good evening. My name is Deborah Honor. I used to be the chair of the branch before we did all this computer stuff and television stuff. Our usual person who stands up here right now will be here shortly. So I may just be up here for a little bit of time. Our branch is the Essex branch of the Ontario Genealogical Society. And that's a provincial group.
Clicker's actually the clicker.
Oh, clicker.
Yeah, the clicker's right there.
I've been a speaker before, but I've never been
There you go.
the first person. So our meetings are live streamed, so that means we are being recorded right now. So if you scream and yell, they will hear it at the other end. So welcome everybody who's online, and hopefully you'll be able to hear any of the questions as well. The OGS has been promoting family history for over 50 years now. I think it started about 1963, was the beginning of the parent group. We have branches and SIGs all across Ontario. Now a SIG, I'll explain branches first. Branches are by geographical area. So ours is Essex County branch. There's Kent County branch. There's Lambton County branch. It goes like that. A SIG is a short form for a special interest group. And one of the special interest groups is the British Home Children. So you could join that group if you wanted to join the OGS and get all of their information and newsletters. We also have special interest groups with the Irish. Do we have one for Scottish?
Yes.
And Irish Palatine, I think, too, are the SIG groups. Most of the SIG groups are also done not with meetings, but with newsletters. And everything is online that they have, so you can check out what they have. Our Essex County Research and General Family History is here in the library of the Windsor Public Library up on the second floor. And we have a resource collection. We have monthly meetings, except for July and August and December. And we have a website. So you can go on our website and see what we have. The Essex branch website is there. It's essex.ogs.on.ca. We have an email if you have any questions or research questions that you might want to have answered. You can write to that email. And we have a Facebook group as well. And I know a lot of people will put on questions, and members of the branch will help them to find what information they may be looking for. Okay, it's the best time to join the OGS if you've never been a member. Okay, so right now it's a partial year OGS membership. You just pay $37 from June 1st to October 31st. And this introductory offer is for new members and allows you to join right away rather than waiting for our 2017 membership cycle. This is also available to those who have not been an OGS member for the past 2 years and would like to come back. So there's the membership at the bottom.
Is that family?
Is there family membership stuff?
There's family membership. That's per person.
That's per person.
I don't know if there's a partial for the family though.
I don't know.
You'd have to go to the
We'd have
website
to
and check
ask
it out.
the OGS website. Ask them. I just do it as myself. My husband just gets the benefits from it because I do it. Okay, tonight's presentation. Okay, tonight's presentation is by Sandra Joyce, and she will be talking to us about the British Home Children. So Sandra, I'll let you take over. Do you want that one or the other one? Good luck. Thank you. Thanks. Well, thanks for coming out tonight, and it's good to see everybody. Just as we did it's all queued up? Perfect. Thank you. So you might be intrigued by the title of my presentation, Finding Family at the Tower. I won't tell you about that right now. So we'll have to wait a little bit till the end of the presentation, and you'll know what I mean.
But this is a journey of discovery, and I think that all genealogists and family historians all start somewhere. Something happens and you want to know some information about something in your own family. And that piece of information usually leads to more questions. And those questions lead to more questions and then more questions, and then you're deeply immersed in something before you know it. And that's what happened to me. A couple of years after my father passed away, I was out on a trip to Nova Scotia, to Halifax. And I went to Pier 21 because I love museums. It's the National Immigration Museum, and I knew that both of my parents had gone through Pier 21 at some point. Now, when as I was going through this tour, I was paying more attention to the building itself and trying to absorb the information or the feel the building was. And I thought about how my dad would have felt going out through Pier 21 as a member of the Royal Canadian Army Medical Corps. I thought about my mom when she came here as a British nurse. She went through Pier 21 as well. So I was walking through and wondering what they would have thought as they came to Canada for the first time, or him leaving Canada to go back to Great Britain and then eventually return after the war. At the end of the tour, they have a little research room there, and I went into the research room and they have some computers, and the researcher asked me if I had anybody who went through Pier 21, and I said yes. So they said, type in your name and see what happens. So I typed in my dad's name and his passenger list came up. And that's where the journey began for me. Because when they gave me a copy of this passenger list, I saw that my dad was a member of a party of a group of children. And he was being sent to Canada by the Orphan Homes of Scotland. Being sent to Brockville, Ontario, destined for farm work. And I thought, what does that mean? It means something, there's a story there. Having studied journalism, of course, you have radar or antenna for a story when something like that happens. So I took this passenger list back home with me to Toronto, and I talked to my sister. Now, she's a good source to have because she was an immigration officer at the time. So I said to her, do you know anything about this? There's something behind this. What is a group of children traveling together and going to do farm work? What does that mean? Obviously, Dad hadn't said anything about it. And I said, the other thing is, it says he's 15 and his brother was 12. I was sure that he came to Canada as an adult. So when I told her all this, she said, I don't know what you mean. So I said, can you find out? And she said, yes, I will. So of course she did find out that the Orphan Homes of Scotland had now changed names. They're called Couriers. It's a charity that still exists. They do work like Bernardo's. Some of you may know that name. They help disabled children in the UK. So they sent us a file. There's the passenger list. You can see that he arrived in Halifax in 1925. He actually arrived before Pier 21 was opened. It opened in 1928, but they started letting ships land there because the previous immigration shed had been destroyed in the explosion in 1917. I'm sure you've heard of that. So they sent us a file. And I realized that he was part of what is now known as the British Home Children. Now, they're called home children because they came from mostly homes, and not the home like you and I know it, but an orphanage or an industrial school or some kind of refuge. They are called British home children to differentiate between the children that were in Canadian orphanages or homes. And they say that there is over 100,000 of these children who were sent. 100,000. Some people say 120,000. I even had someone tell me on the weekend at the OGS seminar that they are now looking at 130,000. That's a lot of kids being sent over here. They were sent here to work. Now, they may have been in dire straits in the beginning. Some were and some weren't. It's a very, very difficult thing, British home children, to explain, because you go from 1869 to 1939 and even into the 40s. I spoke to a gentleman who's the president of the Fairwood Society who came in 1941 as part of a group and was sent out to British Columbia. And I think there are that many stories as well. 120,000, 110,000, whatever the figure may be. And I think we never really will know because they didn't all keep records. Or the records were not very good, or they've been lost. So we know that there were approximately 55 different organizations sending these children. Bernardo's, like I said, you probably know. There may be even some Bernardo descendants here or listening online. Couriers was a big one, the Church of England, the Catholic Church, the Salvation Army, to name a few. And we have someone whose father came through the Smiley homes here with us as well. She was just showing me her documents. Smiley homes were run out of Dublin, and they would send them through a ship from Liverpool to Canada. And think about that time, 1869, where we're thinking about Dixonian times, you know, Oliver Twist, the kids on the street. Think about 1940. Well, it wasn't like that anymore. So it's a big time span and a lot of different stories. When I got my file from couriers, and you get different information from whatever organization your ancestor came from couriers, they were quite sparse, because we found out that the supervisor's daughter of couriers in Canada had destroyed the Canadian records. So all they had in Scotland were the original records, so the admission papers, as well as some special reports. Now, there were a few special reports on my dad because he had run away from the farms that he was on. And he was also, I think, a little bit of a troublemaker, so they said. I can't believe it. But I got that 4-page admission paper, and on it was a lot of information. You think, you look at it and you say, how could this tell me anything? So the first thing that I found out was, my dad had a sister he never told us about. She remained in Scotland. He came here with his brother. We knew nothing about her. Second thing was that my grandfather had been apprenticed at the age of 32. And it was after the First World War. So that led to us questioning his records about whether he had been injured or not. An apprentice at 32 is rather unusual. He's a miner before, so he couldn't go down into the mines anymore. There was also a little note that my grandparents had divorced, which was rather unusual at the time, February the 14th, 1919. Happy Valentine's Day. There was another thing called the Canada Clause. And the Canada Clause was signed by my grandfather, admitting my dad and his brother to the Orphan House of Scotland, relinquishing his parental rights and allowing his children to be emigrated at the discretion of that organization. And when I saw that signature, and this was at the very beginning, I was really upset and really wanted to have a talk with him, because I thought, how could you as a parent just give up your rights like that? Another thing that I found out was they would go and look at different members of the family to make sure that they were unable to take care of the children. So it turned out that my great-grandfather was in the poorhouse. Question. I went to the library in Scotland and I found out that not only was my grandfather there, or sorry, great-grandfather there, but my dad, my aunt, and my uncle were also in the poorhouse. Something, again, that I had no idea of. So I found our aunt's birth certificate, and then I found her marriage certificate, and then I found her children's birth certificates with a little help of the genealogist at Corridors. And on her death certificate was another really important piece of information. And it said, informant. Now, the genealogists among us will know what that means. It's like a witness. So there was a name, and it said daughter-in-law Tracy Cameron, and an address in a town called Lochgilphead in Scotland. It's about 30 miles north of Glasgow and has about 2,000 inhabitants. My sister and I sent a letter, and we got no response. And we thought, okay, so maybe they think, you know, hi, we're your Canadian cousins. You know, you just won the lottery. We'll be over soon, and how much can you give us? We got no response. So a chance encounter, and it seems that I've had a lot of these throughout this story of mine, this journey. A chance encounter was my sister went to Edinburgh for something totally unrelated. She was at a harp workshop. And she went with a Scottish friend of hers from Ottawa. And this lady's brother still lives there. So the brother came and watched them play. And then afterwards they went to the pub like you do in Scotland. And my sister said, oh, what part of Scotland are you from? And he said, Lochgilphead, that little town that was on the death certificate of my aunt. My sister sat on the edge of her chair and said, do you know by any chance Tracy Cameron and Dougal Cameron? And he said, oh yes, they're good friends of mine. That's how I found my cousins. Where there were no branches on that side of my family tree, now there were leaves popping up all over. Now, he wasn't, my sister wasn't able to go and meet them because she was leaving the next day, but I managed to go 2 months later. And I met up with my cousins in the village, Bridget Weir, which is the Corridors Children Village. At any one time, it had 1,500 children there. You can imagine the magnitude of that place. Children were put in there through all kinds of different reasons. One or the other parent was ill, or maybe one of them had passed away, and they didn't know how to take their children. And we go back a step here and think about the beginnings of this whole child migrant scheme. We have to look at the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is really the cause of this happening, because the traditional family setup was that they were born and were raised in the towns that where they were situated, and their children were born and were raised there, and their children. So they had rather a large extended family. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, that changed. parts of families began to move towards urban centers. And if something happened to one or other of the parents, who were they to turn to? You saw in my dad's case, they looked at two relatives that were living nearby. One of them was an aunt who had too many children of her own, and the other one was my great-grandfather, who was himself in the poorhouse and he was suffering from senility. So that's the reason why there were so many families having to rely on these philanthropic organizations that began to pop up all over the place and take care of the children who were in dire straits, like Bernardo's. I look at Annie McPherson as kind of the heroine of all of this, because she was one of the two women who started sending children along with Maria Rye. But when the British government decided to investigate what was happening, because there were some queries about whether the children were being placed or supervised properly, Annie McPherson came out with flying colors. And it wasn't only her two sisters were involved. Louisa Burt was in Knowlton, Quebec. There was another receiving home there. And also another sister who married a Mr. Mary. They carried on her Stratford home, which you probably have heard of. Back to my own story. It's very interesting because I have all these elements that a genealogist uses in my story. I used mail, I used personal encounters, I used online resources, I used chance encounters, coincidences, and finally found my family, which was, you know, for me, one of the reasons I started doing all of this was to find our family, especially after I saw our aunt's name on that certificate. So I was able to meet my cousins. There are the four of them there, the boys. And I kept staring at the eldest one, saying he looked so much like my dad, and he was, he really did look like my dad a lot. And he said to me, oh, where are you going? As we were sipping on some scotch that he wanted me to try. Where are you going next? And I said, well, I'm doing research for my second book. And I have to go down to Aldershot, which is where the Canadian military were stationed, and also London. And he said, oh, you're going to London? Well, you should meet my Moira. And I said, okay. And before I could say anything further, he had her on the phone, passed me the phone, and I talked to her. And she sounds like such a lovely person. I thought, in the day and a half I have in London, I guess I can go and meet her. Got off the phone. And she told me she worked at the Tower. So I thought, okay, well, you know, I know where that is. It's easy to find, pretty central. And after I got off the phone, he opened the scrapbook and he showed me pictures of her. And she's the only female beekeeper in the history of the Tower of London. So that's me meeting my cousin there for the first time. When I went to the Tower, I went up to the gate and I said, hi, I'm Sandra. You're Sandra Joyce. Oh, we've been waiting for you all day. You're the Moira's Canadian cousin. And I said, yes. And they said, well, go and she's over at the Bloody Tower. I said, okay. So I went over to meet her, and it was, all of this was so strange, having family where I didn't have any family before. And we had a drink in a pub, and she said to me, why don't you come and stay with me? You know, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better. And I said, well, this year, probably not, but maybe next year. And she said, well, you can stay with me. And I said, okay, what part of London do you live in? And she said, I live here. And I said, you're telling me that I can come and stay with you in the Tower? And she said, yes. So the next year I went. And I had mulled it over and I was doing a lot of things very busy. And then I saw the poppies in the moat grow. And I thought to myself, I have to go and see that, you know, especially the standpoint that I have available to me. So not only did I was able to go there, I was able to assemble and plant some of those poppies. And that's a picture of my cousin in the moat when it was opened by Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge, or Will and Kate as we know them. She's wearing her royal outfit there. And I said to her, have you ever met the Queen or talked to the Queen? And she said, no, but she's looked at me. And I said, oh, and she said, she made eye contact with it, which apparently she does not do readily. So I nodded in her direction. Now the Queen makes all the final judgments on who is placed as a leader and who is not. So she knew who she was and why she was there. She's the only woman that's ever achieved this position. Others have applied. You have to have 22 years of military experience, reached warrant officer or sergeant major, and there's a couple of other qualifications that you need to have. So very proud of her being my family. And I got to see this. 888,246 poppies. I'll never forget seeing that. It really hammers home the lives lost in the First World War. And this, when you look at it, was only soldiers of the British Empire. Not counting the Americans, not counting the other Europeans, just soldiers of the British Empire. And every night they had a sunset ceremony where they would read off the names of some of the soldiers. And I was down in the moat with her, it was pouring rain. And she read off a couple of names of a friend of mine who had sent them in to participate in the sunset ceremony, which was very, very moving. Now, the British home child story is just, it is so varied and so different, and we all have these different stories, and they're good stories. I've heard from people who said that they were, their the home children were taken in and treated like part of the family. Some inherited the farms that they were on. Some, the children never knew that they were not part of the family. On the other side, there were some instances of horrific abuse, which cannot be forgotten. And then there's the large majority in the middle, I think, that they were treated with indifference. They were treated as workers. They lost their childhoods. They suffered from separation anxiety, and they also had maybe trauma from the communities that they were placed in. I've heard people tell me, yes, no, we knew where all the home children were in our area. Kids can be cruel sometimes, they call them names. And that's probably the reason why we don't know more about this story. I wonder if my dad, or what he would say if he knew that I was telling his story, whether he would want it told or not. Times have changed, certainly. But I find it part of now a passion to tell this story. And my initial response was to write some books, because that's what journalists do or writers do. That was a way of getting the story out there. And I wanted the readers to become emotionally involved in the story. There are other books out there that are nonfiction that have facts and figures. But mine, I wanted to take you on the journey of a typical homeboy based on my dad's experience, from what I could tell. Now, in 2009, there was an Australian apology because the children were sent to Australia, New Zealand, Rhodesia, as well as Canada. in Australia, they were sent there later. So up until the 70s, they were sending children there. And in the 80s and 90s, there became a movement. I don't know if anybody here has read Margaret Humphrey's book or seen the movie Oranges and Sunshine. It's on Netflix if you have that, and it's a very worthwhile movie to watch. But it is quite different from the Canadian experience because in Australia they were placed in institutions rather than individual farms. But they felt it was important enough to apologize for what happened, for taking them, uprooting them, and taking them to another country. The British followed suit by an apology to all the home children and their part in this child migrant scheme. And we got nothing. We got no apology. We did have a British Home Child Year. I don't know if anybody heard about that in this room. 2010. They issued a stamp. I was at the reception for that stamp. There was nobody from immigration there. There was the MP who had initiated the British Home Child Year. But it was very low-key and very, I left feeling like more could have been done, much more. And the previous government had no interest in doing this at all because they knew there was abuse and exploitation. They knew that the children were vulnerable and things happened, but there's no interest in this story. And I think that's also the reason why it pushed me to do more and to tell more people. And to go from Windsor in 2 days to Cornwall, to the other end of the province, to tell this story. Now we do have an e-petition. I've been collecting personally names for a written petition since 2012. There has been an apology tabled in House of Commons 4 times. The 5th time is coming up. But I do have this electronic petition online. It's online till the end of July. So if you would like to sign it, I do have some information back there that you can enter. You need to have an email address in order to be able to do this because the confirmation comes by email. The petition reads, "We, the undersigned, citizens and residents of Canada, call upon the House of Commons to issue an unequivocal, sincere and public apology to the elderly yet living British home children and all the descendants of home children. We seek this apology in order to acknowledge that this child migrant scheme is an important part of Canadian history and to recognize that it is a legacy that has roots in harm and displacement of thousands of vulnerable children. The apology would ensure a higher profile for British home children, thus enabling the education of the public. It would help to heal the wounds of separated families and provide a chance for more people to discover their family history within the context of a proud Canadian culture. We do not seek compensation in any way. We just want recognition, and that we feel that this is a way to get recognition for all those children who, even if they were well treated, they did, I'm sure, suffer some kind of separation anxiety, being sent away from their homeland, and being placed in Canada, which was a very new nation at the time, and not that many people. You can imagine being sent, which most of them were, from an urban center to the country, to a farm. That would be quite a shock. So we started this group called British Home Child Group International, and that's our website address. I do have some flyers back there if anybody would like to have more information. On our website, we have information on sending and receiving homes. The receiving homes were where the children were sent. So there were receiving homes all over the country. They'd be sent there, then the farmers would pick them up, or they would be sent on with by train, with maybe a little sign around their neck. In some form, they would be transferred to the placement that they were situated at. We also have a Facebook group, and on it we will do live genealogical searches for you, and it's all free. So it's interesting to communicate with other people within the group, and it's interesting to see how fast someone will jump in and help you with the research if you do need help. We do have other social media, as you need to do these days. We have a Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and a YouTube channel. We also have a British Home Child database. This was started by Nora Dennis years ago. Names were entered. This whole database was transferred to us, and we have, in collaboration with ReachChat, I'm sure the genealogists here know ReachChat. It's UK's largest free family history forum with over 800,000 members. And we have a special interest group on it, and that includes this database. So you can go in and actively participate with your next of kin or your home child, if you can find them. If not, you can enter them, and you become the point of contact. When somebody wants to reach you, they go to you through ReachChat. It's quite fascinating, actually. And something that we just started, we have a DNA database. And this is not the only tool. It is a tool of many tools. What you can use a DNA database for is to prove something. So in my case, and I'll tell you what happened in my case, my sister got an email from the Canadian Immigration Historical Society asking her if she knew of any family that might be contacting her. And she said, well, no, I think we found the people we were looking for. And they said, well, this person seems to think that they're related to you. And she had written an article for the Immigration Historical Society back in 2012. And named our grandfather with his full name, Robert Barrington, his middle name, Joyce. Now, Robert Joyce is fairly common, but Barrington, not so common. So he grew up not knowing who his mother's father was, his grandfather, because she wouldn't talk about him. So when she passed away, he found her documents and he found the birth certificate, and it said, father. Luckily, her father was Robert Barrington Joyce in Edinburgh, and his occupation was a clothier. Now, my grandfather ended up as a kilt maker in Edinburgh, so that's pretty close. He sent a copy of that birth certificate to us, and everything fell into place. And it turns out that my grandfather, between his first and second marriages, had a little fling and had a daughter between the two, and that was his mother. So that is another tool that people kind of overlook sometimes, a Google search. He Googled the name on the birth certificate and came up with my sister's article as a #1 hit, and then sent off an email to the Canadian Historical Immigration Society, who contacted her, and that's how we found our new cousins. Yeah, it's really fascinating. But when we met him last year, I said he had to do a DNA test. But he agreed to, and he thought it was just great to do this. So we got the results back, and it says first cousins. So, and we had some exciting news at the OGS conference on the weekend, last weekend. that one of the top DNA genealogists in the world is our mentor, and he's become co-admin of our DNA database. So if we have any questions, being fairly new to this type of information, we can turn to him, and he's a really valuable member to have. And he's a funny guy. So fortunately in Ontario, we have British Home Child Day. It's September the 28th. This year, our group is going to have an event at Fanshawe Pioneer Village, which is in London, Ontario, not too far away. In fact, I was there today. And it's free admission and it's free parking. It's part of Doors Open London, so we're very fortunate to have that available to us. Not only can British Home Child descendants come, and we will be having various activities at it, but it's a way to reach out to the public who know nothing about this. And they had about 2,000 visitors last year. And we had a lot of questions. We answered a lot of questions. We'll have a big display, and we've got other various activities planned. I've met a few interesting characters who are descendants. Don Cherry at an event that I co-hosted in Toronto a couple of years ago for a military service that was held. And most recently in Montreal, Jill Giuseppe, who maternal grandfather is a British home child. Interestingly enough, he's the leader, or was the leader of the Bloc Québécois, the Separatist Party. So he says he's a bloke who turned bloc. We found he had Irish Catholic in him, so. And it was really fascinating to meet him and his sister. And they have a theater called Theatre Giuseppe, and they're bringing in a play next year based on the British home children in Australia. So that should be quite a good thing to go and see if you're in Montreal. They also.
Flamboyant jacket.
No, he was very subdued, and rightly so, because it was a military thing. And I was actually quite startled because his on-air persona is quite different. He was very polite. He made a couple of jokes on stage and that, and then he was like, "Oh, after I'm home, I was okay." He's just a very, very nice man, and very. It was very important for him to take part in that. I also have my own website, and on it I have some also different information. And as well, I have 3 books that I've written. The first 2, The Street Arab was the first one that was written in 2011. It was released at the very first British Home Child Day in Canada, in Upper Canada Village, and Belonging was at in 2014 at Blackwood Pioneer Village. And Trees and Rocks and Trees is a youth version. Now you can imagine when the children were coming here and they got on that train from Halifax or wherever they were getting off the ship, that's all they would have seen, Trees and Rocks and Trees. At the back of it, I have questions and answers for children, you know, if they're interested in finding more about this, as well as topics for discussion. And really, a teacher can take this book and they can deliver a whole lesson. And I find that's what happens because it's an optional subject in schools, that if the teachers know about it, they will talk about it. They might pick up that subject. But if they don't know anything about it, they're going to teach something they know, because they do have a heavy workload, you know that. Now I'd like to open the floor for questions. Yes, sir.
When the children were brought to Canada, they necessarily, was there like a rule whether that if they were siblings, were they necessarily put together, or were just, like, were they separated?
More often than not, they were separated, and there was a reason for that, because they felt that they would get over their homesickness faster. So a lot of them lost touch, like I haven't found my uncle. I don't know, past 1941, where I found him on a whaling ship. And there was very little correspondence from what I could tell. There was one sending organization where they tried to keep the siblings together, but a lot of the time people only wanted one child. Yes?
For your research, did you find any information which would suggest why some kids were sent on this route and other kids in the same time period were kept in England? The reason that I asked, my great-grandfather, a 5-year-old, ended up in a church orphanage. 2 of her 4 brothers ended up in a different church orphanage in a different county, and a half-brother ended up in a workshop school in a different county. And between the 4 of them, one ended up Army, one ended up Navy, one ended up dead at 19, and she married in England and then came here. So, but it was the same time period. It was, her father died in 1870.
I think it's an answer on economics. Supply and demand. I mean, there was a lot of demand for children to come be sent here. I think the figures are like 1 in for every child that was brought here. There were 7 applicants, but they wanted them for specific reasons as well. And I mean, it was more or primarily for work on the farms. Canada was an agricultural country at that time, and they needed help because a lot of the families that had 100-acre farms were not very well off themselves, and therefore they needed people or children to help because they could not maybe afford to hire a grown man to help. Each family has different stories, and I've heard, you know, instances where the eldest were kept to take care of the youngest, and the middle children were sent away. Or the little ones were sent away because there was nobody who wanted to or could take care of them. And it seems to be no rhyme or reason to it other than economics, I guess. It's interesting.
Is there any geography in Canada, like perhaps you were sent in the Gatineau area to get at? But is there other successful parts of Canada, Ontario, Manitoba, or was Eastern Canada sole recipients of the children?
Oh, not at all. And it would depend on not only that, but they had receiving homes. Each organization had receiving homes, and that's where the children would be sent. And they would usually be in the area of the receiving homes. For example, Gatineau, this may be a personal question, but was he Catholic? No. Oh, okay. Because a lot of children, Catholic children, were sent to Quebec because they didn't want Protestant families bringing up Catholic children. That's what happened to Joe Joseph's grandfather. He was sent to the St. George's Home in Ottawa, and then they placed him with the French Canadian family. Fortunately, the woman could speak English, so he wasn't entirely shut off. But it would depend on the receiving home. That's why you see pockets of children or descendants too in areas, certain areas, like Bernardo's in Peterborough. They brought over 9,000 children to that location. But they went right across the country. They were sent right across the country.
It was my grandfather who was brought over to the Gatineau area. He was placed in one home. For some reason, that didn't work out. He was sent back to, I guess, the central home, then put in my great-grandparents' home because he ended up marrying one of the daughters.
Ah, that's one way to do it.
You know, when he got, as my grandfather would say, 5 girls in that family, and I had to marry the giggler.
Oh.
And she was a giggler. Oh, okay.
Yes,
How do you find out, like, my grandfather, all I could find is that he was landed in Quebec. I have no idea if it's Quebec City, where,
what year was it?
I think it was 1904.
Okay,
From my memory.
it probably would be Quebec City if it didn't say Montreal.
No, it just said Quebec.
Okay, because some of them were sent on from Quebec, because that was the port, and sent it to Montreal, and some of them were placed by an immigration agent in Montreal.
No, he came into Ontario, but I can't find
What organization was that?
Bernardo's. And yet, through all the paperwork, it just said he landed in Quebec. And it never said anything about where he came from Quebec.
It could be
To
just
Ontario.
this destination of that ship too, you know, they had routes.
And then he would have been put on a train or something to come to Ontario?
Yeah.
And probably gone to Peterborough? Or would he have come straight to Toronto?
Most of the ones in Peterborough were girls.
Yeah, but
The boys were sent to Toronto. Doesn't it say that in the paperwork or?
no, it didn't, if they did, the paperwork had probably, that part had been lost or something.
Oh, no.
But I mean, I have all the letters from Bernardo to Toronto.
Yeah.
That they sent back to England
Mhm.
on his progress and stuff, but, I just can't find where he actually landed, like, once he landed, where did he go from, I mean, did he stay in Quebec for a day or two, or did he, you know?
It would depend on the organization. With Bernardo's, I don't think that they had a place there. Some of the organizations did have a place where they could rest. Others just put them on the trains right away. They were called colonist trains. And they had special conductors and who would accompany the children. Yes.
How was it funded? Like who paid for?
Oh,
passage?
okay.
Yeah.
Um,
How did that work? Did the families that received them have to pay any amount of money towards?
The applicants for children had to pay an application fee. The Canadian government also paid per child, and then the rest was donations. Bernardo's was one of the greatest fundraisers ever. You can see all kinds of merchandise and things that they created to help pay for this. Others like Couriers, like my father's, he said, Mr. Courier said he would pray for money or for the building of a house or something that they furnace they needed or something like that. Well, he would pray and then he would tell his rich friends that he prayed, and then these things would be provided. So some of them were very good at fundraising. Some were sponsored by, they had patrons, and others, you know, this, like Canada was paying per child, and then the application fee would be also paid. So all in all, it was the same amount of money to ship a child to Canada as to keep them for a year in the UK. And that's, you know, another reason why they would have wanted to send them out, because of expense.
How did they go about figuring out which kids went to which homes? Like, was it at random, or did they have to sort of system in play when they came that there were specific homes they went to? Or
In
specific-
Canada?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, it would be the receiving home of the organization.
Okay.
So if
had
they
certain
were
homes.
placed, yeah, exactly. So, for example, my dad's William Courier's receiving home was in Brooklyn. So all the children that came with William Courier's organization went to Brooklyn. Bernardo's had a few different places. They had a farm out in Manitoba. They had the Peterborough, they had, Bacon's had a receiving home in Toronto, and actually that building is still there. It's mysteriously caught on fire a few days after someone wanted to get it designated as a heritage home. So prime real estate, however, it's not, it's a seedy area. It's a couple of doors down from the Seton House, which is the largest homeless men's shelter in Toronto, and also where my dad worked for 25 years as a supervisor. But Yeah, unfortunately, and it was a beautiful building. It was donated to Fagan, which was another organization, by the Gooderham family. Gooderham, you know, the distillery district, that family. So there were families that were also here, were also helping and, you know, trying to do well by these children.
What would be a good starting point to do a search on grandfather? You said if I go tier 21, is that where would I
Okay,
go into that area to see where he landed?
Library and Archives Canada has Library and Archives Canada has a home child database, which was created by, or helped to be created by the work of volunteers from the fiscal organization, which is British Isles Family of Greater Ottawa Society. And they helped research a lot of children. So you can go there. That's where we go first. And look at the database of passenger lists. And then you can join our Facebook group, and you know, there are a lot of knowledgeable genealogists on there that would help you, you know, with your search.
A starting point, and then
The starting point is any information that you have. No. There's a sheet back there if you need to have more information.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to indicate that Sandra said that she will stay around after the formal session to answer any more questions that you might have about the home child. Sandra, on behalf of the Essex branch of the Ontario Genealogical Society, I want to thank you so much for a presentation which gave enlightenment to me, and I'm sure to many others, about a topic which we hear very little about, and but affects many of the people involved. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I wanted to say, thankfully we got the in-room projector working properly, because the slides are upside down and backwards. Oh, we got it working. Thanks.
Tonight, we also have a few other items that we are very proud to undertake. Two more areas of awards that are important, and I'm going to ask Deborah Hahn if she would come up to help us with this reward ceremony. Special awards. The Ontario Genealogical Society has established 2 essay competitions for students. Both require a paper to be written on a topic within family history. Both carry a prize of $500 and publications in the journal Families. The Dr. Don Brearley Award Genealogical Essay Prize is open to secondary school students in grade 11 and 12 in any Ontario school. We are very excited that a local student and daughter of an Essex branch member has won this year's award. Congratulations to Natalie Gagnon.
So I have a little bit here to read about Natalie as well. But I'll hand her the award first, and then everyone can take a picture. You're welcome. You want another one? Okay. You can stay up here while I'm reading about you. Be embarrassed. It's okay. Natalie Gagnon won the OGS Student Essay Award. She and her family will be attending tonight. The Ontario Genealogical Society has several awards to recognize and support family history. The Dr. Don Brearley Genealogical Essay Competition open to students in grades 11 and 12. On behalf of the Ontario Genealogical Society, the award, a $500 prize, and OGS membership will be presented this evening. This is the second time in 3 years a student prize has been awarded locally. this is the second, well, I read that. This year's recipient is Natalie Gagnon from Bell River. Natalie is a grade 12 student at St. Anne's High School in Essex. Natalie's essay is entitled Pieces of the Past. It uncovers details of her ancestors who came to this region and settled in the McGregor area. Her essay begins with a family trip to the Ontario Archives and to Quebec several years ago, which led to uncovering traces of the Gagnon family and attempts to pick up the pieces of research of the Gagnon name where her grandfather George Gagnon left off. She includes excerpts from the Amherstburg Echo with peeks into her family life and connections to a musical past. Natalie comes from a long line of musicians, and linking this passion to her ancestors revealed a deep love of music in her French heritage. Congratulations, Natalie.
Okay.
We have another award, a series of awards that I'm going to ask Deborah to deal with regarding the War of 1812. Deborah?
Okay, for the past 6 years, our branch has been working on a particular project called the War of 1812 Veterans, where anyone could apply for a certificate if they could prove that one of their ancestors had been here in Essex, Kent, or Lambton counties during the War of 1812. It ended on December 31st, 2015. But I got an application form for 3 children on December 30th. And we had a little bit of work to do to get them finished, and that's why it's taken us until June to get this done. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the statistics of how well our program went. We have 16 proven veterans. Now there's a lot more veterans out there than that for the War of 1812, but we actually had 16 different soldiers proven. We had 12 from the 1st Essex. We had 1 from the 2nd Essex, 1 from the Kent, and 2 from the British Indian Department. We had 5 of those veterans who actually received the Detroit Medal. There were only 3 medals given out during the War of 1812 for Detroit, the battle for the capture of Detroit, for Chateauguay, and for Chrysler's Farm. Those were the only 3 battles that were given medals. And you had to have been still living in 1848 to get your medal. So if you died before that, you didn't get one. So we had 5 of those veterans remembered by their families. They also had a group called the proven residents, so that you could prove that your family member had lived here during the War of 1812. We also accepted those applications. And we had 3 of those. We had a total number of descendant applications of 55. So 55 applications. The farthest distance of the applicants were North Vancouver, BC, Savage, Minnesota, United States, and Naples, Florida. The most descendants, we had 10 applications for Cornelius Quick. And all of them were done by 1 person for every member of his family. And the other one was for 9 for members of Isaac Ferris's family. And that was also done by 1 member for all of her family. So it was very important for these people to recognize their families. Now, today we have 9 certificates to hand out to 3 very lucky children whose father actually did an awful lot of work, and I'm very proud of the work that he did. I'm sure the children helped in some way to get these certificates. So the first certificate that we're going to hand out is for Captain Laurent Bondy. He was the captain of the 1st Essex Militia. And is there anyone else here who's a descendant from Laurent Bondy? No, because we do have some other certificates that we've handed out for that name as well. So I would like to call on, oh, I see what she's done. On the three people, but Michaela Marie Karpecki Bornay is the first person. Come on up. And Megan Victoria Karpecki Bornay. And Matthew Paul Karpecki Bornay. I had to find your certificate. There you go. Congratulations. Now, that's the first one. The second one that David wanted me to do was for Joseph Ferris. Now, Joseph Ferris wasn't in any of the militia, but he was here during the War of 1812. So we have a certificate for all three of them again for Joseph Ferris. Now, as we're working on these certificates, I'm looking at the information that we've got, and I'm going, wait a minute. There's a Gordon Buchanan in this family. And look, he's a sergeant major. So you've got a captain in the family, you've got a sergeant major in the family, and somebody who was living in the area. So I emailed David and I said, hey, would you like a third one? And he said, sure. So now I have a Sergeant Major Gordon Buchanan for all three of you. I will give you the envelopes too, okay?
Thank you.
Everybody gets to, I'll give you this in a minute. I have, with having done these certificates, there is a little bit of information that you get from other people who have done it. One of our former OGS members, you gave me, well, actually left it on my front door, the history of Captain Laurent Bondy. Not that he was doing the certificate, because that wasn't acceptable for an application for a certificate, but I photocopied it for you to take home and to learn about his life during the War of 1812 and how he died and his will and things like that. And I also have the other documents on, when you go to the Library and Archives Canada, you can find their the militia units and find out what they were doing. Sometimes it tells you when they joined or when they deserted. Most of the time they deserted because it was crop time to plant or to harvest. They do return usually. So I have the extra papers that I found on that for your family as well. So congratulations to all of you. So we do all that. You're in charge.
Thanks very much, Deborah, for presenting those awards, and congratulations to the recipients. I think they'll find it worthwhile to have those as they grow up, for sure. I'd like to thank everyone for coming tonight. We hope you have enjoyed the session today, and that you will come back in the fall. This is the final meeting before the summer break. We do not meet in July and August, but we do meet September, October, and November, again, not in December. So we hope if you've enjoyed tonight's activities that you will consider coming out on Monday nights. In September, I think, are we in trouble with the summer hours? Still summer hours, so in September, the meeting will again begin at 6. Every other meeting here is 7 o'clock. We hope you'll come out early and interact with each other and enjoy the company and exchange ideas, exchange information. And we appreciate you coming tonight. And thank you very much. And as I said, Sandra is around and she will answer additional questions you might have in regard to the home shelter program. Thanks very much.